Think about this for a second. Nearly 1 in 4 American adults experienced, well, severe physical abuse as a child.
Yeah, it's stark.
And shockingly, about 1 in 5 has been sexually molested. I mean, these aren't just isolated things.
No, not at all. They're far more common than many of us realize, and they really shape lives in profound ways.
Welcome to the Blur, where we try to unpack the forces that mold us. Today we're venturing into the complex world of traumatic experiences. And for you, our listener, if you want to grasp the core of these issues without getting totally lost in academic jargon, we're here to, make it clearer.
Our guide today is The Body Keeps the Score. It's a really groundbreaking work. It illuminates how trauma doesn't just affect our minds, right? It leaves a physical imprint. It impacts our emotions, our capacity for connection, even our physical health.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to really distill the essential understanding of how trauma affects individuals, drawing directly from the insights and the stories in this book.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's get right into it. How does trauma actually show up in people's lives? Sometimes in ways that just completely fly under the radar.
Well, one of the most compelling early examples in the book is Tom, a Vietnam veteran. I mean, by all outward signs, he was a huge success story.
Like what?
Valedictorian, a Marine, went to law school, had a family, the whole package. Yet beneath this accomplished surface, Tom felt profoundly empty.
Empty.
Dead inside was how he put it. And this was after his time in Vietnam.
Wow. That's such a stark contrast, isn't it? This perfect outward image masking this deep inner void.
Exactly.
What was really behind that emotional numbness?
Well, even though his wife was supportive, Tom found himself just unable to feel genuine affection. He had this persistent emotional distance from everyone.
Like watching from afar.
Yeah, almost like observing life through a pane of glass. And interestingly, the only emotions that would occasionally break through were these intense bursts of anger and this pervasive sense of shame.
So here's someone hitting all the milestones society expects, but they're fundamentally disconnected from their own feelings, from others. It really highlights how trauma can create this profound split, doesn't it, between how someone seems and what they're actually going through inside.
It does.
The key thing here for you listening is that trauma can cause this deep disconnect, outward success hiding inner numbness. It's vital to understand that people around us might seem fine, but they might not be.
Precisely. And the book gives another really powerful illustration of this with Bill. He was having a reaction to a Rorschach test.
Ink blots.
Yeah. One of them triggered this incredibly intense flashback of a child being killed in Vietnam.
Oh, wow. That must have been just overwhelming. It wasn't just like a quick memory then.
No. It was a completely visceral reliving of the event. Bill was suddenly back in that horrific moment.
Experiencing it all again.
Seeing the same images, smelling the same smells, feeling the same physical sensations he had 10 years before. He was just in a state of panic.
Triggered by an ink blot.
Something seemingly so innocuous, yeah.
What strikes me about that is how trauma can just hijack the present moment. Triggered by something that seems totally random. It's like the body and mind stay tethered to the past, right? Ready to reactivate those intense feelings at any second.
That's a good way to put it. Tethered.
It really points to a central paradox of trauma. It leaves these invisible wounds that deeply impact our inner world and our outward reactions, even to normal stuff.
Exactly. And this deep sensitivity to things that seem neutral, it just reveals the profound and often, unpredictable ways trauma can resurface.
Okay.
The book then shifts a bit, looking at how these hidden histories of trauma show up so often in psychiatric care.
Right. What were the initial observations there in that setting?
Well, initially, there was this surprising number of what the author calls midnight confessions on the hospital ward.
Midnight confessions.
Yeah, patients would quietly reveal these histories of significant childhood trauma. Things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, witnessing violence, often really disturbing experiences.
And was it the sheer number that was unexpected?
It was pretty striking, yeah. And later research actually confirmed it. Over half of the people seeking psychiatric help have endured these kinds of adversities. Yeah. Assault, abandonment, neglect, rape, witnessing family violence. But what was also notable was that these underlying traumas, they often weren't the main focus during the formal medical rounds.
Really? What was the focus then?
The emphasis tended to be more on managing the immediate symptoms, suicidal thoughts, things like that, rather than really digging into the foundational causes and the broader context of their lives.
It sounds like Treating the smoke without looking for the fire. Putting out immediate flames, but not asking what's fueling them.
Exactly.
The book talks about the ecology of their lives, their achievements, relationships, what brings them peace.
Yeah.
That often gets missed.
Precisely. And the book then broadens out, again, looking at the wide range of ways trauma can manifest, sometimes in really unexpected ways. It mentions Blurr's observations about body hallucinations in some patients, particularly sexual ones.
Body hallucinations. That sounds quite disturbing.
Yeah. Blurr noted these individuals experienced a whole range of sexual sensations, some typical, some very distressing. And he proposed that these hallucinations might actually be linked to real, though maybe repressed, physical sensations stemming from past trauma.
That's a really powerful connection. The idea that these intense internal experiences could be rooted in actual embodied trauma that hasn't been dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
How did this understanding kind of evolve through the author's own clinical work?
Well, the author shares the story of Sylvia, a patient who very tentatively disclosed her history of childhood sexual abuse.
Okay.
And this experience really highlighted how even well-intentioned, caring interactions in a clinical setting could inadvertently feel like a re-traumatization for someone with that background.
Gosh, that's tricky.
It led to this really crucial guiding principle. If you wouldn't do it to a friend or a child, you should question whether you might be unknowingly replicating past trauma with a patient.
That seems so fundamental, yet so vital. That need for profound sensitivity and awareness in therapy.
Absolutely.
The book also touches on the physical ways trauma can show up, right?
Yes. The author observed that many patients seemed physically awkward, kind of uncoordinated. Even their casual conversations lacked that natural flow of gestures and facial expressions we normally expect. It suggested that trauma isn't just psychological. It's held within the body itself. And that's a concept that gets explored much further later on through body-based therapies.
It's like the body has its own memory, even when the conscious mind struggles to recall or process what happened.
Exactly.
Which kind of leads into this idea of repeating traumatic patterns. Freud called it the compulsion to repeat. What's the book's take on that?
Well, Freud's theory was that these repetitions were an unconscious attempt to gain mastery over painful negations, eventually leading to resolution.
Right, working it through.
But The Body Keeps the Score offers a different perspective. It suggests that repetition often just leads to more pain, more self-hatred. Even repeatedly reliving trauma in therapy might just reinforce the preoccupation, the fixation.
So constantly revisiting the trauma in the same old way might not actually be the key to healing it.
That seems to be the argument, yeah.
The book also explores why people might be drawn to negative situations in the first place. What's that about?
Yes, the concept of attractors is introduced. Normally, we gravitate towards things that feel good, right?
Right.
So why the pull towards danger or pain? Research from the 70s by Richard Solomon suggested that the body adapts to stimuli. Activities that initially cause fear or pain, like, say, extreme sports, can eventually become pleasurable as the body establishes a new chemical balance, a new equilibrium.
So the body kind of recalibrates its baseline. What starts out feeling awful can, through repeated exposure and shifts in our internal chemistry, actually become something that feels good.
Exactly. It's a fascinating adaptation.
Now, let's turn to what's actually happening inside the brain during trauma and when those experiences are recalled.
Yeah, this is where the neuroimaging research discussed in the book becomes really critical. Participants were asked to revisit their traumatic moments using these carefully crafted scripts.
Scripts?
Yeah, focusing on specific, isolated fragments of their experience. And then brain scans were taken during these recollections and compared to scans from when they described safe, controlled scenes.
Okay, and what did those scans show?
About
the brain's response?
Well, even years after the traumatic events, just recalling them triggered significant activation in the amygdala. That's the brain's fear center.
Right, the alarm bell.
Exactly. And this, in turn, set off a cascade of stress hormones. It led to this physiological state of high arousal, increased heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, even when the person was physically safe in the scanner.
Wow.
The key insight here is that the body reacts as if the threat is still present, no matter what the rational mind knows.
So the body doesn't necessarily distinguish between remembering the threat and the threat actually being there.
Not in that moment, no.
That makes total sense with those intense, visceral flashbacks you mentioned. And what about the finding the book calls speechless horror? That phrase always stood out to me.
That was a particularly revealing discovery. The scans showed a decrease in activity in Broca's area.
Which is?
It's a region in the left frontal lobe, crucial for speech. Whenever a flashback was triggered, activity there dropped.
So it's visual proof.
It offers visual evidence of how trauma can literally impair our ability to put thoughts and feelings into words. It mirrors the effects of physical brain injuries like strokes. It's a literal speechless horror.
It's like the language part of the brain just goes offline when the trauma hits again.
Seems that way.
And the cumulative effect of these repeated stress responses must be huge.
Absolutely. The prolonged elevation of stress hormones in traumatized individuals has really far-reaching consequences. It contributes to problems with memory, attention, increased irritability, sleep disturbances.
And long-term health.
Yeah, and a range of long-term health problems, depending on individual vulnerabilities. So it's not just about the immediate psychological distress. There are very real, lasting physical effects.
So trauma's impact goes way beyond just our mental state. The book also discusses the emotional brain. What's the core idea there?
Right, the emotional brain, which includes more primitive structures like the reptilian brain and the limbic system, is primarily concerned with our survival and well-being. It's constantly scanning for danger and opportunities.
Our internal radar.
Pretty much. When it detects something significant, it releases hormones that create visceral sensations. Could be a subtle gut feeling, could be overwhelming panic. And these influence our decisions, often subconsciously. Think of it as our internal alarm system.
These gut feelings, intuitions, even the subtle ones, they play a massive role in guiding us, right?
Yeah.
From everyday choices to big life decisions.
Definitely.
Now, the book also gets into the experience of numbing and disconnection. How does trauma lead to that?
Depersonalization is a common experience. Patients recount deeply disturbing events, but they show no emotion. It's like all the emotional energy has just been drained away.
That must be hard for a therapist.
It can be incredibly challenging because the patient seems so detached, almost lifeless. But the key insight here is that this emotional numbing is often a protective mechanism. It's a way to cope with overwhelming pain.
It sounds like a major roadblock for traditional talk therapy.
Indeed. The book describes how in severely traumatized individuals, brain scans can actually show decreased activity across many regions, basically a blanked out brain.
Blanked out.
Yeah. In those cases, conventional talk therapy, which relies heavily on the ability to think clearly, feel deeply, remember, make sense of things through language, well, it can be largely ineffective because those very capacities are compromised by the trauma itself.
So the brain's reaction to overwhelming trauma can actually make it hard to engage with the therapies designed to help.
It can, yes.
Which leads to this idea of looking beyond specific psychiatric diagnoses, maybe to the fundamental nature of mental suffering itself.
Exactly. The book proposes that if we look past the long list of psychiatric labels, we often find common underlying patterns.
Like what?
Difficulties in forming satisfying relationships and challenges in regulating emotional arousal. Easily becoming enraged or shutting down emotionally, feeling overwhelmed, disorganized. Often, it's a mix of these.
And the standard medical approach, focusing on finding the right drug for a specific disorder, might be missing that more fundamental issue.
The book suggests that focus can sometimes distract us from understanding how our problems really interfere with our ability to connect with others and function in our social world. It emphasizes the crucial role of our social engagement system.
Okay, tell me more about that. What is the social engagement system and how does trauma affect it?
Well, the ventral vagal complex, or VVC, is a key part of our nervous system. It's responsible for feeling attuned and connected to others. Think of it as our connection network. It's what allows for that pleasurable back and forth in social interactions. If a mother and child playing, the synchrony in dancing or singing together.
Right.
Trauma, the book argues, represents a breakdown of this system. When we experience overwhelming threat and feel trapped, another part of our nervous system, the dorsal vagal complex, DVC, can take over.
And what does that do?
That leads to a slowing of heart rate, shallow breathing, dissociation, even collapse or fainting. So, trauma can essentially hijack our natural capacity for connection, leading to withdrawal or shutdown instead.
So trauma can fundamentally mess with our ability to connect with others, which is such a basic human need.
Absolutely fundamental.
The book also contrasts hypervigilance and numbing as two different kinds of responses to trauma.
Yes, it highlights the insights of Stephen Porges here. He explains that while mammals are naturally somewhat alert, our defense systems need to temporarily dial down to allow for things like emotional closeness, play, mating, nurturing. Traumatized individuals can get stuck, either in a state of hypervigilance where they're constantly on high alert, unable to enjoy ordinary pleasures.
Like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. Or they get stuck in numbing where they're unable to fully experience new things or even recognize genuine danger when it's there. It's like having a faulty smoke detector in the brain.
Faulty how?
Either it's constantly blaring or it fails to go off when there's a real fire. They can't properly assess what's safe and what isn't, or fully engage with positive experiences.
Wow. That makes sense. The book also brings in the findings of the ACE study here.
That's right. The Adverse Childhood Experiences study. It showed a really strong link between early abuse and neglect and a significantly higher likelihood of negative health and social outcomes in adulthood.
Like what kind of outcomes?
Including a higher risk of being raped as an adult. Also, witnessing a mother being assaulted in childhood increased vulnerability later on. These findings just underscore the profound, long-lasting impact of early adversity on our whole lives.
They really do highlight those far-reaching consequences. And the book then emphasizes something crucial, that emotional abuse and neglect can be just as devastating as physical or sexual abuse. It uses Sherry's story.
Yeah, Sherry's experience. Growing up feeling unseen, unknown, unsafe. It had truly devastating consequences. Even after getting a college degree, she had no close friends, ended up in this joyless clerical job.
And her relationship.
Her only significant relationship was with the man who actually kidnapped and repeatedly raped her. And when she finally escaped and desperately called her mother for help, her mother refused to even take the call.
Oh my God. That's just heartbreaking, unbelievably isolating.
It really illustrates that chronic emotional wounds can be just as deep, just as debilitating as physical ones.
Absolutely. This brings us to the impaired sense of self that can result from trauma. What's going on in the brain there?
The book identifies specific brain regions that are key to our sense of self-awareness. It metaphorically calls it the mohawk of self-awareness.
The mohawk.
Yeah, areas like the orbital prefrontal cortex, medial prefrontal cortex, anterior and posterior cingulate, the insula. In people with histories of chronic trauma, activity in these very regions can be significantly decreased.
So the neurological basis of our sense of I can be directly hit by trauma.
It seems so.
What does that mean for how someone experiences themselves?
It makes it difficult to register internal states like emotions or bodily sensations, and difficult to assess the personal relevance of things happening around them. It becomes harder to have a clear, stable sense of me and how external events relate to that self.
Which connects to Antonio Damasio's idea of the proto-self.
Exactly. Explain that a bit more. What is the proto-self?
Well, the proto-self refers to these fundamental brain structures that regulate basic bodily functions: breathing, hunger, sleep. They're located near areas that register our background bodily feelings.
Okay.
Damasio argues these areas provide the essential, pre-conscious knowledge about our body's current state. It's the crucial foundation for our conscious sense of self, the bedrock upon which our I is built.
It's like the body is constantly feeding us this raw data that informs our sense of being.
Right. And the book also gives a stark reminder that trauma isn't just about direct abuse within a family. Even kids in really challenging community environments can experience significant trauma.
Absolutely. The control group in one study, they didn't have histories of direct caregiver abuse, but they lived in poverty and regularly witnessed shocking violence in their communities.
Like what kind of violence?
Things like classmates being set on fire, kids caught in gang crossfire, friends being killed, horrific stuff. And this raises a critical question. How do their trauma responses compare to hospitalized kids with direct abuse histories? Given this high baseline exposure to violence, it really highlights how pervasive trauma can be in many communities.
It really underscores that trauma can be a widespread issue, not just confined to certain types of families or homes.
Definitely not.
The book also describes how traumatized children react when they actually share their stories.
Yeah, in the study, children who'd been abused often became highly agitated, disorganized when recounting their experiences. They frequently needed breaks.
And diagnoses. Many
had been diagnosed with ADHD, were taking Ritalin, but the medication didn't seem to lessen their emotional arousal in those moments of telling their story. The book shares this particularly striking example of a 7-year-old girl, sexually aroused, reacting to a seemingly innocent picture of a pregnant woman.
How did she react?
with sexually explicit questions and significant agitation. It contrasted so sharply with a control group child's innocent, kind of wistful interpretation of the same picture. It vividly shows how deeply and differently trauma can shape a child's perception of the world.
It's a powerful example of how trauma can just warp a child's understanding of even the most basic things.
It really is.
This brings us to the foundational importance of early relationships, which the book explores in depth.
Yeah, the formal study of infant-mother relationships really kicked off with observations of, believe it or not, upper-class English children sent off to boarding schools at very young ages.
Deprived of family contact.
Often, yeah. Deprived of consistent family contact. And key figures in attachment theory, Bowlby, Bion, Guntrip, Fairbairn, Winnicott, they all focused on how these earliest experiences shape our later connections and our fundamental sense of self. Their work really underscored the absolutely crucial role of early caregivers.
How essential those early bonds are for healthy development. The book talks about the concept of a secure base. What does that mean?
Well, humans are fundamentally social creatures, right? A secure base, which comes from reliable and responsive caregiving, helps children develop a sense of safety and security in the world.
Yeah.
This secure attachment is crucial for regulating emotions, forming healthy relationships later on, and developing the ability to tell safe from unsafe situations and people. Kids who experience secure attachment tend to become well-adjusted, valued members of their communities.
It's like having a dependable anchor in the world, allowing you to explore and handle challenges with trust and safety.
Exactly, a safe harbor.
The book also distinguishes between organized and disorganized attachment patterns.
Right. So secure, avoidant, and anxious attachment styles are considered organized because they represent the infant's best strategy for getting care from their specific caregiver, even if that care is inconsistent or insensitive.
And these patterns tend to stick.
They often tend to persist into adulthood, yeah. Anxious toddlers might become anxious adults. Avoidant toddlers may be emotionally distant adults. But development isn't totally linear. Life experiences can change things.
Okay. What about disorganized attachment?
That stems from inconsistent or frightening caregiving, and it's particularly problematic. Children who don't feel safe in infancy often struggle significantly with managing their emotions. They show more physiological signs of stress.
Like higher stress hormones.
Yeah, and they're at a higher risk for developing various psychiatric problems later. And this early biological dysregulation, the book emphasizes, it often doesn't just automatically reset to normal as they get older or move into safer environments.
It lingers. And this early lack of safety has such far-reaching effects. That quote from Bowlby, "What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self," that really hits hard.
It's such a powerful statement, isn't it? If a child's feelings and experiences aren't acknowledged, aren't validated by their main caregiver, it can lead to this fundamental disconnect from their own inner world.
Leading to?
Denial, dissociation, this deep-seated feeling of not being real inside. The book also explores how traumatic memories themselves can be fragmented, incomplete.
Which makes so much sense given how the brain reacts to overwhelming stress. The book shares Marilyn's experience, remembering her childhood sexual abuse through flashbacks of wallpaper.
Exactly. That wallpaper became the focal point, the detail her mind kind of latched onto as a way to dissociate during the trauma itself.
And her mother.
When she turned to her mother for protection, she just got a limp embrace or silence or angry scolding, which just reinforced her isolation and lack of safety. It's as if the mind fixates on seemingly random details to cope with experiences too overwhelming to process directly.
It's like the mind grabs onto anything but the main event.
Yeah.
This leads to a discussion about the limitations of diagnostic labels in really understanding trauma's impact.
Yeah, the rise of the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual, since 1980 has undeniably shaped how we understand and treat mental health. It influences insurance, research funding, even general cultural understanding.
But is it helping the patients?
Well, the book raises a crucial question. Has the system provided comparable benefits for the actual individuals it's meant to serve? It suggests that focusing only on fitting experiences into neat diagnostic boxes might actually obscure the underlying impact of trauma, which often cuts across those boundaries.
Like trying to force complex human stuff into predefined boxes, which might not capture the messy reality of trauma.
Exactly.
The book then highlights a profoundly important question related to safety.
Yeah, a seemingly simple question on a questionnaire revealed something shocking. Was there anybody who you felt safe with growing up?
And the finding.
The staggering finding was that 1 in 4 patients could not recall a single person they had felt safe with as a child. 1 in 4.
Wow. Just imagine navigating childhood and the world after, without that fundamental sense of safety, feeling unseen, unprotected.
It's hard to comprehend. It underscores the profound isolation so many traumatized individuals experience from such a young age.
And this understanding fueled a big effort to formally recognize developmental trauma, right?
Yes, there was a dedicated push to include developmental trauma disorder as a distinct diagnosis in the DSM. The book recounts a key meeting with Robert Spitzer, a major figure in the DSM's history.
What did he suggest?
He suggested conducting a field trial to compare the specific symptoms of trauma across different groups: kids with abuse histories, domestic violence survivors, people with recent traumas.
Did it get included?
While that specific diagnosis wasn't ultimately adopted in that revision, the momentum for understanding the long-term effects of early adversity kept building.
And while that specific diagnosis didn't make it in then, the research into adverse childhood experiences continued, leading to a kind of accidental discovery.
Indeed. Vincent Folletti's accidental finding. He was running an obesity clinic using supplemented absolute fasting.
Okay.
And he noticed many participants who successfully lost weight then dropped out of the program because of significant emotional distress related to past trauma surfacing.
Really? The weight loss triggered it?
It seemed to. This prompted a deeper investigation into the prevalence and impact of adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. This accidental link really highlighted how deeply intertwined our physical and emotional well-being are. Unresolved past trauma can manifest in seemingly unrelated physical health issues.
That unexpected connection really showed how linked our physical and emotional health are, and how past trauma can pop up in physical ways.
Definitely.
The advocacy for recognizing developmental trauma kept going, though.
It did. The book mentions a significant presentation on developmental trauma disorder given to state mental health commissioners. And impressively, these commissioners offer their collective support for its inclusion in the DSM. Through a formal letter to the American Psychiatric Association, they recognize the huge reach and budget of public mental health services and the critical need to better address developmental trauma in how patients are assessed and treated.
That really underscores the potential for huge positive change if these insights about developmental trauma were more broadly accepted and integrated into our mental health systems.
Absolutely. There's massive potential there.
The book also emphasizes the fundamental biological need for social support.
Absolutely. Social support isn't just, a nice thing to have. It's a fundamental biological necessity. It should be at the very heart of prevention efforts and treatment strategies for trauma.
And recognizing trauma's impact on kids shouldn't mean blaming parents.
Yeah, definitely not. Recognizing the profound impact of trauma on child development shouldn't lead to blaming parents, who often have their own histories of trauma and need support themselves.
And the U.S. system.
Notably, the United States stands out among industrialized nations for its lack of guaranteed comprehensive family support systems. Research by Nobel laureate James Heckman and also David Olds has clearly shown the significant long-term economic and social benefits of investing in high-quality early childhood programs and home visitation programs.
What kind of benefits?
Programs that provide support for both parents and children. They've been shown to yield tangible, positive outcomes, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Yeah.
Reduced healthcare costs, lower incarceration rates, increased economic productivity. It's a smart investment.
Those programs really show concrete positive results for individuals and society. Lower healthcare costs, less crime, better productivity.
Exactly.
The book also revisits the significant historical work of Jean-Martin Charcot in understanding trauma.
Right. Charcot's pioneering work on hysteria back in the day, it emphasized the concept of embodied memory, how traumatic experiences get stored in the body, and the frequent lack of conscious recall or verbal story associated with them.
Right.
The case of Lelog is a great example. He developed leg paralysis after a traffic accident he didn't consciously remember, but he held the strong belief he was going to be run over. It perfectly illustrates how trauma can manifest physically without conscious memory.
The body remembers and reacts even when the mind doesn't have the clear story.
Precisely. The key insight is that the body can remember and react even when the mind doesn't have a neat narrative.
The body holds on to the experience even when the mind can't fully grasp it. The book also touches on society's tendency to deny the profound impact of trauma.
Yeah, the public burning of Erich Maria Remarque's book, All Quiet on the Western Front, by the Nazis. It starkly illustrates a societal fear of confronting the psychological wounds of war.
And denying trauma's effects is damaging.
Denying the widespread consequences of trauma can have deeply damaging societal repercussions. Look at the rise of fascism and the harsh treatment of traumatized veterans in Germany after World War I. It's a chilling reminder of how collective denial can impede healing and even fuel further societal problems.
It's a stark reminder of how collective denial blocks healing and can even make things worse societally. The book also contrasts how we typically recall positive versus traumatic memories.
Right. Positive memories are usually recalled as organized stories, right?
Okay.
Clear beginning, middle, end, generally no big gaps.
Okay.
Dramatic memories, though, tend to be disorganized, fragmented, often characterized by vivid sensory details mixed with an inability to recall the sequence of events or other crucial context. It's as if the trauma shatters the linear narrative of time in our minds.
Like the trauma just breaks the timeline. The book then shares Nancy's personal story, her reflections on her incomplete memories of a surgery where she had anesthesia awareness.
Nancy's journey really highlights that ongoing struggle with fragmented memories. And the important process of accepting that complete recall isn't always necessary for understanding the impact of the trauma.
So she accepted the gaps.
She came to recognize the persistent pull to the past, not as a failure, but actually as part of her survival mechanism.
But her story also offers hope, right? About recovery.
Absolutely. Nancy's proactive approach to a later surgery was key. She had a detailed preoperative meeting with the medical team, arranged for someone supportive to be there during anesthesia.
And the result?
It led to this profound feeling of safety when she woke up. And later, her decision to switch therapists to a psychodynamic psychiatrist and start Pilates were also pivotal steps in her healing. It really underscores the importance of taking agency and actively seeking the right kinds of support for yourself.
It really underscores the power of taking charge and finding what works for you.
Yeah, agency is huge.
The book then gets into the concept of restoring balance by understanding the window of tolerance.
Right. Resolving traumatic stress involves regaining a balanced integration between our rational and emotional brains. So individuals can feel more in control of their reactions and their lives.
And the window of tolerances.
It represents the optimal zone of emotional arousal where we can effectively process experiences. Triggers can push individuals outside this window, either into hyperarousal like panic, rage, feeling overwhelmed, or hyperarousal numbing, sluggish thinking, feeling immobile, shut down. Both states lead to a range of distressing symptoms.
So the goal in therapy becomes helping people expand that window of tolerance, stay within that range where they can process things without getting overwhelmed or shutting down.
Exactly. Building that capacity to stay present and engaged, even when difficult feelings arise.
The book also stresses the fundamental importance of the therapeutic relationship itself.
Oh, absolutely crucial. A truly curious and collaborative therapeutic relationship is key. The therapist needs to be genuinely interested in understanding the individual's unique experiences and needs, not just slapping on a generic diagnostic label.
It should be a partnership.
Therapy should be a mutual exploration of the self. And for individuals with histories of abuse from caregivers, feeling safe with anyone can be a massive challenge.
So how do you start?
Identifying even one figure from the past, maybe a teacher, a neighbor, anyone who showed genuine care, can be the crucial first seed of re-engagement. It highlights that enduring human need for connection and the transformative power of even small, positive relational experiences.
It emphasizes our need for connection and how even small positive moments can start the healing. We're wired for it.
The book also discusses the significant role of sensation and touch in emotional regulation.
Yeah, mainstream trauma treatment often underemphasizes the importance of safely experiencing physical sensations and emotions. Sometimes medication becomes the primary intervention instead.
But natural ways to soothe distress, like gentle touch, hugging, rocking, can be profoundly effective. They reduce excessive arousal and foster feelings of being whole, safe, protected, and in control. It reminds us of our innate need for physical comfort and connection, which trauma can so deeply disrupt.
It's a reminder of that basic need for physical comfort and connection, which trauma messes with so badly.
Absolutely.
The book also offers a critical look at the widely used exposure-based therapies.
Right. The theory behind CBT exposure therapy is that repeated exposure to the traumatic stimulus in a safe setting will gradually reduce the distress and help associate the memories with safety.
Makes sense in theory.
Yeah, and it aims to address avoidance, the I don't want to talk about it response. However, the body keeps the score raises a critical point. Reliving trauma can sometimes reactivate the brain's alarm system.
And potentially make things worse.
It might impair the very brain regions needed for integration and processing, so it could possibly lead to re-experiencing the trauma rather than actually resolving it.
And the concerningly high dropout rates in PTSD treatment among veterans might suggest this is happening for many people.
The low completion rates of recommended PTSD treatments among Iraq and Afghanistan veterans seeking VA care strongly suggest that exposure therapy, as it's often practiced, isn't effective for a lot of them.
So what's needed?
Truly processing traumatic experiences requires the individual not to be overwhelmed, which highlights the need for alternative, perhaps more nuanced therapeutic approaches.
This opens the door to exploring other treatments, like MDMA-assisted psychotherapy.
Well, yeah. While there were early, largely unsupported claims about LSD and trauma treatment, there's a renewed, more research-driven interest now in substances like MDMA or ecstasy when combined with intensive psychotherapy.
What's the thinking behind it?
Research by Michael Mathieu and others suggests MDMA's effects increased self-awareness, compassionate energy, curiosity, clarity, confidence, creativity, connectedness, plus decreased fear, defensiveness, numbing might create this therapeutic window.
A window, too.
Where patients can safely revisit traumatic memories while staying within their window of tolerance.
It's definitely a controversial area, but maybe one with potential for deeper processing in a more contained, supportive way.
That's the hope, yeah. Needs careful research.
The book also powerfully highlights the healing potential of truthfully facing and articulating one's experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Keeping secrets, suppressing information, it creates this significant internal conflict. It drains energy, motivation, leads to boredom, shutdown.
Yeah, physical issues.
Yeah, and various stress-related physical and behavioral problems. Identifying the true source of these responses allows feelings to become important signals, guiding us towards what needs attention.
Like the writer Karl Marlantes.
Yeah, he shares his personal experience that genuine recovery required telling the truth, even brutally painful truths. There's this fundamental human need to find overarching meaning in suffering. And if we don't find it, we might avoid, make things up, or lie.
Finding a narrative.
Exactly. The book shares a poignant anecdote about reintegrating a split-off part of a traumatic childhood experience just by imagining that child as a real, separate being. It led to overwhelming sadness, but ultimately healing.
Wow.
And it also advocates for group discussions among soldiers led by peers as a way to integrate feelings with actions after experiencing face-to-face killing.
That act of bringing hidden parts into the light, finding a story for it, can be so transformative.
Hugely.
The book also describes practical techniques for establishing a sense of inner safety.
Yeah. One valuable technique involves helping patients establish inner islands of safety within their own bodies.
How does that work?
It involves identifying specific body parts, postures, or movements where they feel a sense of groundedness, calm, when they feel overwhelmed. These safe spaces within can often operate outside the vagus nerve's panic messages and can be a crucial aid in trauma integration.
Examples?
Like focusing on the sensation of your hands moving, practicing controlled breathing, or engaging in gentle movements like those in Qigong. Finding those anchors within yourself.
It's about finding those anchors inside to navigate intense emotions. The book then introduces EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as another powerful therapy.
Right. EMDR was initially met with quite a bit of skepticism. Some dismissed it as just a fad involving finger wiggling.
But it works.
Well, the book recounts Maggie's positive experience at a professional training. During an EMDR session, she vividly relived a childhood rape, but simultaneously observed it from her adult perspective.
And the effect.
It led to this profound release of tears, a deep realization of the enormity of the abuse, and crucially, an acceptance that it wasn't her fault.
And despite those early doubts, EMDR has gained more recognition and research support.
Indeed. The trauma clinic described in the book found EMDR instrumental in their community trauma response work, helping patients who'd previously seemed unreachable. The staff even shared videotapes of their EMDR sessions. They believed in it so strongly.
But is it right for everyone?
Research suggests chronic childhood abuse often needs different approaches than single-incident adult trauma. While EMDR is powerful for stuck traumatic memories, it might not fully resolve the deep effects of betrayal and abandonment in childhood abuse.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, a significant 2014 study identified EMDR as the most effective treatment for adult-onset PTSD, despite ongoing skepticism from some. And interestingly, an earlier study showed EMDR outperformed biofeedback for combat veterans with PTSD, which led to its endorsement by the VA.
So it's a valuable tool shown to be effective, especially for certain kinds of trauma.
Seems so, yeah.
The book also highlights how trauma can show up as chronic tension in the body.
Oh, yeah. Chronic experiences of anger or fear lead to sustained muscle tension. And this can manifest as a whole range of chronic pain conditions: muscle spasms, back pain, migraines, fibromyalgia, other persistent pain syndromes.
And often these physical symptoms are treated separately.
Often, yeah. Treated in isolation without addressing the underlying emotional trauma that might be contributing to them.
It's another powerful example of how trauma is held in the body, often presenting as physical ailments that seem unrelated.
Exactly. The body keeps the score. Right.
Right. The book also introduces the concept of the mind being composed of various parts.
Yeah, the internal family systems, or IFS model. It views the mind as this complex, dynamic system made up of various parts. Each has its own distinct feelings, beliefs, motivations, sometimes leading to internal conflicts.
And the goal isn't to get rid of parts.
No, the second core assumption of IFS is that there's a core self, this mindful, compassionate center that can help reorganize the inner system and communicate with these parts in ways that build trust and integration.
And neuroscience supports this.
Notably, neuroscience research has shown that mindfulness practices can increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, and decrease activity in the amygdala, the emotional brain, which enhances our ability to regulate emotional responses.
So instead of trying to suppress certain feelings or parts, IFS aims to understand and integrate them. The book shares examples of how this works in therapy.
Yeah, Joan's initial realization was that having conflicting feelings is just normal. But after a negative work evaluation, she became highly distressed, self-critical. This revealed a powerless part holding memories of past abuse, a part she initially resisted facing.
In Brian's story.
Brian's therapeutic journey gradually unveiled a panicked part, fearing overwhelming pain from his childhood alcoholic family, parental depression, suicide attempts, which was also affecting his adult relationships.
Other parts emerge.
As therapy progressed, yeah. A protector part fearful of women, a caretaker part that got self-worth from looking after his family. And ultimately, Brian connected with his exile, the scared, motherless child inside him. These examples show that process of uncovering protective layers and the underlying wounded parts they're shielding.
It's a process of uncovering those layers of protection and the wounds underneath.
Exactly, gently.
The book also explores psychomotor therapy as a more action-oriented way to address trauma.
Right. Psychomotor therapy offers a way for individuals to physically experience past emotions, visualize past events, and express what they couldn't at the time through movement and action. It's essentially about rewriting crucial scenes in the movie of their life.
How does that work in practice?
For instance, using role players to enact desired past interactions, maybe preventing abuse, or creating an ideal nurturing parent figure can stimulate powerful emotions and lead to a profound sense of relief, of unburdening.
It's a more embodied experiential approach, engaging the body's wisdom and healing.
Very much so.
The book gives a compelling example of Maria creating a therapeutic tableau.
Yeah, in her psychomotor session, Maria carefully chose a group member to represent her real father and positioned him at a very specific distance and orientation. That precision highlights how the right hemisphere of the brain, which is heavily involved in nonverbal and emotional processing, projects outward into our spatial awareness. The body has its own way of expressing and processing past relationships.
It's like the body holds a blueprint of past experiences and can communicate them in ways words sometimes can't.
Exactly.
The book explains how these therapeutic enactments can create virtual memories.
Precisely. Psychomotor therapy structures can create these virtual memories alongside the painful real ones. They provide tangible sensory experiences of being seen, cradled, supported.
Like an antidote.
Yeah, serving as powerful antidotes to the hurt and betrayal of the past. The goal is to become viscerally familiar with realities that directly contradict the frozen, panicked self that trauma creates, gradually replacing those feelings with experiences of safety, mastery, delight, genuine connection.
Like dreaming.
It can be likened to the associative function of dreaming, yeah. Suggesting psychomotor structures can also kind of reweave the past within the realm of embodied experience.
It's about creating new, corrective emotional experiences to counteract the negative impact of traumatic memories.
Exactly, giving the body a different experience.
The book also delves into neurofeedback as a way to directly retrain brainwave patterns.
Right. The discovery of EEG, electroencephalography, by Hans Berger way back in 1924. Initially met with skepticism, but eventually became an accepted tool for diagnosing things like epilepsy by measuring brain electrical activity.
And different patterns mean different things.
Different patterns of brainwave frequencies reflect different mental states. There was early hope of finding direct links between specific psychiatric problems and EEG irregularities.
Was anything found?
One replicated finding was that kids with hyperactivity and impulsivity often showed slower than normal frontal lobe brainwaves. That's now considered a biomarker for ADHD. It helps explain their executive function difficulties, the rational brain having less control over the emotional brain. A pattern also seen in people with histories of significant abuse and trauma.
And research clarified this.
Yeah, research by Ruth Lanius and Robert McFarlane further clarified a mechanism for the lack of focus often seen in PTSD, which raised the important question: how can we intentionally change these dysfunctional brainwave patterns?
So neurofeedback offers a potential way to directly address these underlying neurological patterns linked to trauma and related issues.
That's the idea, yes.
The book introduces Sebern Fisher and her pioneering work in this area.
Sebern Fisher has been a leading figure using neurofeedback, especially with severely disturbed adolescents. The book shares these compelling before and after drawings by a 10-year-old boy.
What were his issues?
Severe temper tantrums, learning difficulties. The drawings illustrate the positive changes he experienced after neurofeedback training. They're a powerful visual testament to the potential of this approach.
It's fascinating directly seeing the brain's activity change with training. The book also discusses how neurofeedback has been accepted in the field.
Well, there was initial optimism about the mind's potential for self-regulation, but then the rise of the chemical model of the mind-brain, with psychiatric meds coming in strong in the mid-70s, led to medication-based treatments dominating, often sidelining other approaches like neurofeedback.
But it continued elsewhere.
Interestingly, neurofeedback has continued to grow in Europe, Russia, Australia. Despite facing limitations in research funding and widespread acceptance in the U.S. due to competing systems and limited commercial potential or consistent insurance coverage.
It seems like various factors influenced which treatments got adopted where.
Definitely complex factors.
The book shares a powerful story of using neurofeedback for severe trauma with a young woman named Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa was 18, history of severe trauma. She had matured out of the Child Protective Services system with no ongoing support. Sebern Fisher took her in for neurofeedback.
What was she like?
She presented in a very vacant state, often carried a pumpkin as a transitional object. She couldn't engage in traditional talk therapy because discussing stressful topics would make her either shut down completely or panic. She also struggled with self-harm, major eating, and sleep problems.
It sounds like she was in a really fragile, dysregulated place.
Very much so.
The book then clarifies the significance of different brainwave frequencies, mentioning beta waves specifically.
Right. Beta waves are associated with focused attention, actively scanning the environment for potential danger. High levels of beta activity are often linked to agitation and anxiety. Understanding these different frequencies is key to how neurofeedback aims to retrain brain activity.
So neurofeedback tries to help people better regulate those patterns. The book also mentions broader benefits beyond just trauma.
That's right. Neurofeedback has been shown to potentially improve creativity, enhance athletic control, increase inner awareness, even in people who are already high achievers. Interestingly, early neurofeedback research had links to sports medicine, exploring ways to optimize athletic performance.
It highlights the potential for neurofeedback to enhance various aspects of human functioning.
It really does.
The book then shifts again, exploring the therapeutic power of theater as an embodied form of healing.
Yeah, traumatized individuals often develop this deep fear of feeling emotions intensely, fearing loss of control. Theater, in contrast, centers around embodying emotions, giving them voice, engaging rhythmically with others, taking on different roles.
How does that help with trauma?
Trauma can lead to a profound sense of being cut off from humanity. Theater provides a collective space to confront the complexities of the human condition. It connects survivors through shared understanding of universal themes: betrayal, assault, loss. Tina Packer, the theater director, is quoted on using the whole body and resonating with others' feelings in theater.
It's about reclaiming connection and agency through embodied expression.
Exactly.
The book also discusses how mirroring exercises in therapeutic theater programs can help build connection.
Right. Traumatized adolescents often avoid extended eye contact because of that underlying uncertainty about safety and connection. Mirroring exercises used in the trauma drama program involve synchronized movements.
What does that achieve?
It helps individuals get in tune with each other on a visceral level, not just cognitive. And when these exercises end in shared laughter, it's a powerful indicator of developing safety and attunement within the group.
It's a way of building nonverbal communication and trust through shared physical experience.
Precisely.
The book then touches on the significance of the final theater performance.
Yeah, the final performance presents this unique challenge. It requires participants to face the wider community and build a deeper sense of self-trust. The book shares this moving story of a chronically runaway girl playing Ophelia. Despite her extreme nervousness, her eventual commitment to the role seemed to signify this growing realization of her own importance within the group and the intrinsic value of the experience itself.
It sounds like a powerful moment of stepping into the light, connecting with others.
A real turning point, potentially.
The book concludes by summarizing the significant advances in our understanding and treatment of trauma.
We really are in a new era of understanding. Advances in neuroscience give us a much clearer picture of how trauma impacts brain development, our ability to regulate emotions, focus attention, connect socially,
And imaging techniques.
Sophisticated brain imaging techniques are helping us identify the neurological origins of PTSD, better understand trauma-related behaviors. We also now understand that our experiences can change the brain throughout our lives, even affecting gene expression.
Which offers hope.
This knowledge opens up exciting new possibilities for interventions that can help bring brain areas related to self-regulation, self-perception, attention back online, offering both more effective treatments and increasing our potential for prevention.
It's a hopeful message about the brain's capacity for healing and adaptation.
It really is. Neuroplasticity is key.
The book also touches on the importance of healing collective trauma.
Yeah, the profound experience of witnessing the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was based on the philosophy of Ubuntu. My humanity is inextricably bound up in yours. It underscores the fundamental need to recognize our shared humanity for true collective healing.
Because we're social creatures.
Humans are fundamentally social creatures, wired for cooperation. Trauma profoundly disrupts this innate system. Many mental health challenges are, essentially, attempts to cope with unbearable emotions resulting from a lack of human connection and support.
And institutions sometimes miss this.
The book critiques institutions that bypass emotional engagement, focusing narrowly on faulty thinking or suppressing emotions and behaviors. It also highlights the importance of trauma-sensitive approaches in schools.
How so?
Advocating for understanding and responding to children's behaviors as potential symptoms of traumatic stress, rather than just resorting to punishment, which can often re-trigger trauma. Simple shifts, acknowledging upset, helping a child calm down, exploring causes, discussing solutions can make a world of difference.
And for kids from chaotic homes.
Predictability, clarity, consistency are crucial. And caution against punitive parental contact, which can further destabilize them. Finally, the book acknowledges the many individuals whose groundbreaking work contributed to our current understanding in body-based therapies, mindfulness, neurofeedback, IFS, theater. So many pioneers.
So, to wrap up this deep dive, it's crystal clear that trauma leaves deep, lasting marks, affecting not just our minds, but our bodies, our ability to connect. But as the body keeps the score, so powerfully shows, understanding these impacts opens the door to so many paths toward healing and recovery. There's real hope in the brain's neuroplasticity, in these innovative therapies, and in the fundamental power of human connection.
And this brings us to a crucial final thought for you, our listener. Considering how prevalent trauma is in our society and the profound ways it shapes individuals and communities, what potential do you see for a wider adoption of trauma-informed approaches across our systems, healthcare, education, social services, to foster greater healing and collective well-being?
Something to think about. We encourage you to reflect on the concepts we've explored today and maybe, delve deeper into the source material itself.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share with your known.